They call it numbness. I call it preparation. You sit in rooms full of noise, surrounded by men who mistake volume for strength, movement for progress. But you've learned the weight of silence. You've felt the burn of being misunderstood, the sting of watching weaker men claim what you deserved. They think you're broken. You know you're being forged. There's a fire that doesn't scream. It consumes. A power that doesn't announce itself. It simply takes. You've been walking through winter long enough to know that spring doesn't come for the weak. It comes for those who learn to feed on cold, to find strength in exile, to build thrones from the bones of their former selves. The world thinks it broke you. Tonight we prove it was only tempering steel. You wonder why the world recoils from your silence. Why they mistake your quiet for emptiness, your stillness for lack of fire. But you know better. Each second you spend in quiet is a blade being sharpened. Each word you swallow is an arrow nocked and ready, held to the string, waiting for the one shot that matters. The noise around you is a weak man's shield, loud, blinding, brittle. Your silence is armor, iron wrought, forged in solitude, then cooled in the winds of suspicion. They fear the wolf with no growl, the man whose eyes give nothing, whose lips rarely part, who waits, observes, catalogs every tremor in the world's nervous system, and reveals nothing of his own. There is power in being underestimated. You become the shadow they forget to account for, the dagger beneath the cloak. Their demand for you to speak, to open up, is not care but fear. Fear that your silence means you see more than they do. And you do. You see the anxieties behind their volume, the fractures hidden by their smiles, the desperation woven through their laughter. Every forced question, every nervous glance, another piece on the chessboard. Silence is reconnaissance. Patient observation is preparation for war. You learned young that words are often traps. That emotion spilled too freely becomes ammunition for lesser men. Your quiet was called shyness. In truth, it was discipline. Bravado is easy. To reveal nothing is hard. You train yourself every day to let the world rush and panic while you measure, wait, watch. In classrooms, parties, boardrooms, the same theater, the same noise, the same games, and you sit back. You catalog each weakness, each tell. You become the last player left unmarked, unknown, unbroken, unowned. Do you feel the pressure sometimes? The urge to break your own code? To speak, just to prove you're still alive? Hold it a little longer. Let the storm exhaust itself. The man who speaks only when it is essential understands the weight words carry. You are not a vessel for idle chatter. You build tension, and in tension, there is leverage. Like a king in exile, reigning over a kingdom of inner silence, you wait for the moonless night when decisive action matters. And when it comes, the world will realize that they mistook your quiet for absence, your restraint for emptiness. But you were only buying space, buying time, until the right moment to move. You do not owe the world your transparency. You owe yourself strategy, control. The wolf who howls alerts the hunter. The one who stalks in silence controls the outcome. Even your closest rivals will not sense the storm building behind your eyes. Not until it is too late. Sometimes you watch them, men addicted to their own noise, desperate for approval, squandering their influence for likes and handshakes. You see the emptiness growing behind their smiles, the louder they become. In your chest there is something older, colder, a patience learned through wounds, through years spent being misunderstood. You learn to turn absence into advantage, to make your silence echo in the corridors of men's minds. People claim vulnerability is strength. Sometimes it is, but you know the other side, that some wounds are best left sheathed, that some truths, when revealed, lose their teeth. You hold yours close, a vault of storms, unshared and unspent. In a world addicted to overexposure, you weaponize what you do not say. Every observation you gain in quiet is a secret the world will never recover from. You make others speak first, reveal first, move first, then you strike. Not with clumsy force, but surgical precision. The man skilled in silence is always outnumbered, never outplayed. There will be days when doubt whispers, when the world's expectation gnaws at your resolve. Speak now, Reveal now. Fit in. Resist. The longer you remain unclaimed, the more they search to label you. Let them. Their words are keys that fit no lock in your mind. You are not a problem to solve, but a puzzle left unfinished on purpose. Your silence is not the absence of pain. It is the evidence of discipline, the scar across your will that reminds you. Power is not granted to the loudest. It is seized, quietly, by those hungry enough to wait. You know what you are. Not a ghost, not a sheep. A wolf stalking the tree line, eyes glowing in the dark, saying nothing, always there, never seen. You do not chase approval. You compel respect. You do not announce your arrival. They sense your presence only when it's already too late. In a world desperate to be understood, you learn to survive being misunderstood. In a world obsessed with noise, you learn to hear the music behind silence. Hold your ground. They will never see you coming. All they will know is what you leave behind, written in the moment when cold silence becomes sudden power. You do not need their faith. You never needed it. You are silence sharpened to a point, waiting, always waiting, to cut through the noise when it matters most. They told you that your pain was a problem to be solved, that your sensitivity was weakness to be hidden, that the scars carved across your psyche were evidence of your failure to protect yourself. But what if they were wrong? What if every wound was a lesson written in blood? Every betrayal a masterclass in human nature? Every moment of suffering a forge fire that didn't break you? It refined you. You carry marks that soft men will never understand. Not just physical scars, but psychological etchings carved so deep they rewrote your neural pathways. Each one a story. Each one a teacher. Each one proof that you survived what would have shattered weaker souls. While they learned about life from textbooks and motivational videos, you learned from the raw edge of experience. Your classroom was chaos. Your curriculum was pain. Your graduation was survival. The wolf that learns to hunt while wounded becomes the most dangerous predator in the pack. Not because it's uninjured, but because it learned to function despite injury. To track through bleeding. To strike through pain. To endure what breaks other animals and emerge not just alive, but evolved. You know this truth in your bones. Every time someone overlooked you, dismissed you, betrayed your trust, they weren't just causing damage. They were accidentally forging steel. Your sensitivity, the very thing they mocked, became your tactical advantage. While other men stumbled blind through human interaction, you developed supernatural awareness. You learned to read the micro-expressions that reveal deception, the voice inflections that betray true intentions, the body language that exposes hidden agendas. Your pain taught you to see what happiness makes invisible, the cracks in people's masks, the fault lines in their loyalty, the weakness they hide behind their strength. There's a difference between being broken and being broken open. Broken implies destruction, defeat, something that can never be repaired. But broken open, that's archaeology of the soul. That's finding the diamond buried beneath layers of stone. Every trauma you endured didn't diminish your capacity. It expanded it, forced you to develop muscles that comfort never builds. Emotional endurance, psychological resilience, the ability to think clearly when others panic, to plan when others react, to remain steady when the world tilts sideways. You've been in rooms where grown men crumble at the first sign of pressure, where supposed leaders fold when criticized, where strong facades collapse the moment someone questions their authority. And you watch quietly, remembering all the times you functioned while your world was ending. When you made decisions despite heartbreak, when you worked through betrayal, when you carried responsibility while carrying wounds that would have hospitalized weaker spirits. This isn't about celebrating suffering. This isn't about glorifying pain. This is about recognizing what pain created in you. A capacity that can't be taught, only earned. A strength that can't be faked, only forged. A vision that can't be learned from books, only from bleeding. You see through people because you've been seen through. You anticipate betrayal because you've been betrayed. You prepare for the worst because you've survived it. Every scar is scripture written in a language only you can read. The translation: I endured this and became more dangerous because of it. Not dangerous in the way of violence or cruelty, but dangerous in the way of competence. Dangerous in your ability to function when others can't. Dangerous in your immunity to the emotional manipulation that controls lesser men. Dangerous in your understanding of how pain works, how people work, how the world works when the masks come off. You learned that trust is a luxury you can't afford carelessly. That loyalty is rare enough to be precious when genuine. That most people will abandon you the moment supporting you becomes inconvenient. These aren't pessimistic worldviews. They're strategic intelligence. While other men operate on hope and assumptions, you operate on tested knowledge and proven patterns. There's a coldness in your eyes now that wasn't there before. Not the coldness of cruelty, but the coldness of clarity. The kind of clear-sighted assessment that comes from seeing human nature at its worst and choosing to become better rather than bitter. You know what you're capable of surviving because you've already survived it. You know what you're capable of achieving because you've achieved it despite every obstacle they placed in your path. The world looks at your scars and sees damage. You look at your scars and see diplomas from the University of Hard Experience. Each mark proof that you attended classes other men skipped, that you passed tests other men would have failed, that you graduated with honors from courses other men never even enrolled in. You don't flinch anymore because you've already taken the hit. You don't break because you've already been broken and rebuilt yourself stronger. You don't fear because you've already faced what they're afraid to imagine. The wolf doesn't apologize for its fangs. Neither should you apologize for the weapons that your wounds became. They called it rejection. You call it selection. Every door that closed, every circle that excluded you, every group that decided you didn't belong, they weren't punishing you. They were protecting themselves. From what? From the dangerous realization that you didn't need them as much as they needed each other. That your standards were higher than their comfort zones. That your independence threatened their entire ecosystem of mutual dependence. You spent years thinking something was wrong with you. Why didn't you fit? Why couldn't you just blend in, laugh at their jokes, care about their concerns, chase their validations? But exile wasn't your punishment. It was your preparation. While they learned to function as a pack, you learned to function as a sovereign. While they developed groupthink, you developed independent judgment. While they sought consensus, you sought truth. The throne you're building isn't made of gold or wood. It's made of every moment you stood alone and didn't break. Every decision you made without asking for permission. Every standard you maintained when it would have been easier to lower them. Every time you walked away from what felt good to pursue what was right. Sovereignty isn't inherited. It's earned in the crucible of isolation, forged in the fire of being misunderstood. You learn something they'll never understand. The difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is the absence of connection. Solitude is the presence of self-mastery. You discovered that most people's need for constant validation, endless communication, perpetual approval, wasn't connection at all. It was addiction. Addiction to external confirmation of their worth, their choices, their existence. You broke that addiction without even realizing it. Notice how they panic when left alone with their thoughts. How they fill every silence with noise, every empty moment with distraction. They can't bear the weight of their own company because they never learned to respect the person they're alone with. But you found something in the silence that they lost in the noise. You found yourself. Not the version they expected, not the version they demanded, but the version that emerges when no one is watching, judging, influencing. The king doesn't ask for permission to rule. He doesn't campaign for approval or lobby for acceptance. He simply governs, first himself, then his domain. Your domain started small. The thoughts in your head, the choices you made when no one was looking, the standards you held when it cost you socially, the principles you maintained when compromise would have been easier. Territory conquered one decision at a time, one boundary at a time, one refusal to bend at a time. They mistake your selectivity for arrogance, your standards for pretension, your independence for antisocial behavior. Let them. Their misunderstanding is your camouflage. While they debate your motivations, you advance your position. While they gossip about your aloofness, you build your empire of one. While they analyze your behavior, you analyze theirs and find it wanting. You see now why the system rejected you. Not because you were inadequate, but because you were incompatible. Oil and water don't mix. Not because one is superior, but because they operate by different laws. You operate by the laws of self-sovereignty. They operate by the laws of mutual dependence. You generate your own validation. They require external supply. You make decisions from internal compass. They navigate by committee consensus. The exile taught you something else. How to evaluate people without needing their approval. How to see their true character when they think they're hidden. How to identify the difference between genuine strength and performed confidence. How to distinguish between people worth your time and people seeking to waste it. The outside perspective isn't just different, it's clearer. You see the game from beyond the board. Your throne isn't visible yet, but it's real. Built from every compromise you refused to make. Every boundary you held despite pressure. Every time you chose difficult truth over comfortable lie. Every moment you prioritized your integrity over their acceptance. The foundation is set. The walls are rising. The crown waits. They'll try to draw you back into their world now. They sense something different, something powerful, something they can't quite identify. They'll offer invitations, extend olive branches, suddenly discover your value. But you know the difference between being wanted and being needed, between being appreciated and being used, between genuine respect and strategic inclusion. The boy wanted to belong. The man chooses where he belongs. The king creates the place where belonging happens. You are not seeking invitation to their table. You are building your own kingdom, setting your own standards, establishing your own court. And when they finally understand what they lost when they thought they were getting rid of you, you'll be too far beyond their reach to care. Your exile was not their rejection of you. It was your elevation beyond them. The throne was always yours. You just needed the isolation to build it. They taught you that anger was the enemy, that fury was weakness, that the fire burning in your chest was something to suppress, medicate, apologize for. But they were afraid of what you might become if you learned to harness what they wanted you to extinguish. They knew that controlled anger is the fuel that forges kings, and they needed you to remain a peasant. There are two kinds of fire in this world. The wild blaze that consumes everything, including itself. Hot, loud, destructive, brief. And then there's the forge fire. Controlled, sustained, patient, hot enough to melt steel but contained enough to shape it. The difference between a man who explodes and a man who executes is not the absence of fire. It's the mastery of it. You learned this the hard way. Every injustice you swallowed, every betrayal you absorbed, every moment you were overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. The fire didn't die. It condensed, compressed, refined itself into something more dangerous than rage. Purpose. While other men burn out in spectacular tantrums, you learned to burn inward, creating pressure, building force, accumulating the kind of quiet intensity that moves mountains. The world fears controlled anger because it represents something they can't manipulate or predict. The man screaming in the street is manageable. His fire is visible, chaotic, spent. But the man whose anger runs cold, who channels fury into focus, who transforms resentment into relentless advancement, he is the storm they never see coming. He is the earthquake that reshapes landscapes while they sleep. Your anger isn't petty anymore. It's not about who said what or who did what to whom. It evolved beyond personal grievances into something larger, more systematic. You're angry at mediocrity being rewarded, at weakness being celebrated, at potential being wasted, at systems designed to keep strong men weak and weak men comfortable. This isn't emotional reaction. It's philosophical rebellion. You see them everywhere now. Men who settled for less than they're capable of, who traded their fire for false peace, who chose comfort over conquest, safety over sovereignty, acceptance over authenticity. They look at you with a mixture of envy and concern, sensing the controlled inferno behind your calm exterior. They can't understand how you maintain such intensity without self-destruction, such focus without burnout. The secret is patience. Not the passive patience of the weak, but the predatory patience of the wolf. You don't strike when angry, you strike when ready. You don't react when provoked. You respond when advantageous. Your fury doesn't demand immediate satisfaction. It demands ultimate victory. Every slight is catalogued. Every wrong is noted. Every injustice becomes fuel for the long campaign ahead. This is the mathematics of controlled anger. Intensity times time equals transformation. Brief rage accomplishes nothing except temporary relief. But sustained, focused fury, the kind that burns steady for months, years, decades, that reshapes reality, that builds empires, that tears down what shouldn't exist, and constructs what must. You understand now why they wanted you to let it go. Forgive and forget, move on. Not for your health, but for their safety. Your anger, properly channeled, makes you ungovernable, unpredictable, dangerous to their systems of control. When a man stops seeking their approval and starts seeking his own justice, he becomes something they can't manage, truly free. The forge fire doesn't burn everything. It purifies everything. Your anger burned away your need for their validation. Your fury incinerated your fear of their judgment. Your controlled rage melted down your old self and recast it into something harder, sharper, more resilient. They wanted to extinguish your fire. Instead, they taught you to feed it more efficiently. You don't explode anymore because you don't need to. The pressure you've built doesn't require violent release. It requires strategic application. Like a master blacksmith, you've learned to use just enough heat, just enough force, just enough pressure to shape the world around you into what it should be, rather than accepting what it is. The weak man's anger consumes him. The strong man's anger fuels him. The king's anger transforms kingdoms. You've moved beyond the first category, mastered the second, and are approaching the third. The fire that once threatened to destroy you has become the energy that powers everything you build. They thought they were protecting the world from your anger. They were actually protecting themselves from your potential. Because a man who masters his fury doesn't just change his life, he changes the rules of the game entirely. Your anger isn't your enemy. It never was. It's the forge fire that's been waiting for you to become worthy of wielding it. Human behavior isn't chaos. It's mathematics. Predictable patterns wrapped in emotional complexity, but patterns nonetheless. While other men stumble through social interactions hoping for the best, you've learned to see the equations, the psychological algorithms, the invisible mathematics that govern every conversation, every negotiation, every power exchange. This isn't manipulation. It's mastery of the operating system that runs human nature. They operate on autopilot, driven by needs they don't understand, seeking validation they can't define, avoiding pain they've never examined. But you see the code. You recognize the patterns. Every person carries a blueprint of their desires, fears, and pressure points, written in the language of their behavior. While they focus on what people say, you focus on what they reveal. While they listen to words, you read the data. Watch them in meetings, in relationships, in moments of stress. The same scripts playing out, the same defensive mechanisms, the same predictable responses to predictable stimuli. They think they're complex, unique, impossible to understand. But complexity isn't randomness. It's just multiple simple patterns running simultaneously. And you've learned to see the patterns. The man desperate for approval will sacrifice his principles for applause. The woman afraid of abandonment will tolerate disrespect to avoid solitude. The leader insecure about his authority will overcompensate with aggression. The intellectual uncertain of his intelligence will flood conversations with unnecessary complexity. Every behavior is a key to understanding the lock of their psychology. Every interaction is data about their operating system. You don't judge them for their patterns. You study them. Judgment is emotional noise that interferes with clear analysis. You observe with the detachment of a scientist examining specimens. Not superior, not inferior. Just different species operating by different rules. They run on external validation. You run on internal calibration. They need constant feedback. You gather intelligence quietly and act when advantageous. This is where your isolation served you well. Removed from the need to fit in. You develop the ability to see clearly. Without skin in their social games, you could observe objectively. like a chess master studying the board while others play checkers. You began to see moves ahead, patterns within patterns, the larger game being played beneath the surface interactions. People reveal everything, if you know how to listen. Not to their words. Words lie, deflect, perform. Listen to their priorities. What they spend time on. What they spend money on. What they avoid talking about. What makes them defensive. What makes them light up. The architecture of their psychology becomes visible when you stop focusing on what they want you to see and start seeing what they can't hide. The mathematics of dominance isn't about force. It's about positioning. The king doesn't need to announce his authority. His authority is evident in how others orient themselves around him. You don't dominate through aggression. You dominate through competence. Through being the person others need when things get difficult. Through having answers when others have questions. Through remaining steady when others become unstable. Value is the ultimate currency, and most people don't understand their own worth or how to leverage it. They undervalue their strengths and overcompensate for weaknesses. They give away their time, attention, and energy to anyone who asks, then wonder why they're not respected. But you've learned to inventory your assets, to understand exactly what you bring to any equation, to position yourself not as supplicant, but as solution. This isn't about becoming cold or calculating. It's about becoming clear. Clear about motivations, yours and theirs. Clear about what drives behavior, what creates loyalty, what builds respect. Clear about the difference between what people say they want and what they actually respond to. Clear about the invisible structures that determine who rises and who falls in any hierarchy. The men who succeed aren't necessarily the smartest or strongest. They're the ones who understand the game being played, who see the board while others see only their next move, who recognize that every interaction is an exchange of value, every conversation a negotiation, every relationship a strategic alliance with terms that are either explicit or implicit but always present. You've moved beyond hoping people will understand you, appreciate you, treat you fairly. Hope is not a strategy. You understand them, leverage what you can offer, and create conditions where treating you fairly becomes their optimal choice. Not through force or manipulation, but through making yourself valuable enough that losing you would cost them more than respecting you. The mathematics of dominance is simple. Become indispensable, remain mysterious, and never need them more than they need you. When you understand the equation, you don't have to solve for X. You become X, the unknown variable that determines every other outcome. Every wound tells a story, but not the story they taught you to read. They convinced you that scars were evidence of damage, proof of vulnerability, marks of where you failed to protect yourself. But they were wrong, dead wrong. Your scars aren't records of your weakness. They're transcripts of your education in the darkest classroom that exists, human nature stripped of its mask. You didn't just survive betrayal, you studied it. Every knife in your back became a lesson in identifying the subtle signs that precede treachery. The way loyalty shifts in their eyes before they speak the words. The micro-expressions that leak truth through practiced lies. The tone changes that signal allegiance turning to ambition. You learn to read the weather patterns of human character, to predict storms long before the first drops fall. Most men live in naive optimism, believing people are fundamentally good, that trust should be given freely, that betrayal is an anomaly rather than a feature of human architecture. But your wounds taught you something they'll never understand. People reveal their true nature only under pressure, only when something they want is at stake, only when loyalty becomes costly. Your scars are a PhD in recognizing these moments before they happen. Pain is the most honest teacher you'll ever have. It doesn't lie to make you feel better. It doesn't sugarcoat reality to protect your feelings. It shows you exactly what people are capable of, exactly how little your well-being matters when it conflicts with their desires, exactly how quickly love turns to indifference when convenience is threatened. This isn't pessimism. This is tactical intelligence gathered at the cost of blood and tears. You learned that the person who hurts you most will always be the one you trusted most. That betrayal only comes from the inside, never from strangers. That the deeper you let someone in, the more damage they can inflict. These aren't reasons to never trust again, they're reasons to trust strategically. to verify character under pressure before extending vulnerability, to understand that access to your inner world is a privilege that must be earned, not a gift to be freely given. Every scar taught you to see what happy people miss, the fault lines in character, the inconsistencies between words and actions, the difference between someone who supports you when it's easy and someone who stands with you when it's costly. You developed supernatural intuition because you paid the price in pain to calibrate your internal warning systems. Your wounds became radar, detecting danger others walk into blind. You know now that most people's kindness is conditional. Their loyalty is transactional. Their love is contingent on you being useful, agreeable, profitable to their self-image. This knowledge doesn't make you bitter. It makes you selective. You've learned to distinguish between genuine connection and strategic relationship, between someone who values you and someone who values what you provide. There's a particular kind of clarity that comes from being broken by someone you loved. It burns away illusions that comfortable people never have to release. It forces you to see people as they are, rather than as you need them to be. It teaches you that you cannot love someone into being trustworthy, cannot sacrifice your way into being valued, cannot give enough to guarantee receiving. Your scars became scripture because they taught you the most important lesson of all. You are the only person you can truly count on, not because others are evil, but because their priorities will never perfectly align with yours. Their fears will never match yours. Their capacity for loyalty will never equal their capacity for self-preservation. This isn't tragedy. This is reality. And reality, once accepted, becomes power. You learn to trust your scars over their promises, your experience over their explanations, your instincts, sharpened by pain, over their words, polished by practice. The man who has been burned learns to see smoke before others see fire, to feel heat before others sense danger, to move away before others realize they should run. Every mark on your soul is a word in a language only you can read. The translation is always the same. I survived this and became wiser. Not harder, not meaner, not crueler, wiser. Wise enough to see patterns, wise enough to protect what matters, wise enough to invest your trust like a precious resource, rather than spending it like common currency. They look at your caution and call it trust issues. They see your boundaries and call them walls. They mistake your wisdom for cynicism, your self-protection for selfishness. Let them. Their judgment comes from a place of inexperience, their criticism from a position of naivety. They haven't paid the tuition that your pain demanded. They don't speak the language that your scars taught you. Your wounds weren't your punishment. They were your education. And the diploma was written in blood, sealed in tears, and validated by survival. The most dangerous man in any room is the one who needs nothing from anyone in it. Not their approval, not their validation, not their permission, not their presence. He sits like a king in exile, watching kingdoms rise and fall while remaining untouchable, ungovernable, unowned. This isn't coldness, this is immunity. Immunity to the emotional manipulations that control weaker men. You learned this power by accident, through disappointment, through betrayal, through realizing that caring too much gave others too much control over your inner weather. Every time you invested your emotional stability in someone else's opinion, you handed them a remote control to your happiness. Every time you needed their approval, you became their slave. Every time you feared their rejection, you gave them power over your choices. Indifference isn't the opposite of love. It's the opposite of addiction. The addiction to external validation that keeps most men trapped in cycles of performing, pleasing, pursuing crumbs of acceptance from tables they should own. You broke that addiction not through willpower, but through overdose. Too much caring, too much hoping, too much needing, until your system rejected it all and developed immunity. Watch them in meetings, relationships, social gatherings. The quiet desperation for acknowledgement, the subtle bids for attention, the careful calibration of every word to maximize approval and minimize offense. They've made themselves hostages to other people's moods, prisoners of other people's opinions, slaves to other people's standards. And they call this connection friendship, love. But you know the difference between genuine connection and strategic relationship, between someone appreciating you and someone needing something from you, between respect earned through competence and attention bought through performance. When you stop needing their validation, you start seeing their motivations clearly. When you stop seeking their approval, you start commanding their respect. The gravitational pull of indifference is real. The person who cares least controls the dynamic, not through cruelty or coldness, but through independence, through having options, through being willing to walk away when the terms become unacceptable. This isn't negotiation tactics. This is natural law. Supply and demand applies to attention, affection, and availability, as much as it applies to any other resource. You discovered that most people mistake intensity for importance. They think the loudest voice matters most. The strongest emotion carries the most weight. The most dramatic reaction deserves the most attention. But real power whispers. Real strength is steady. Real influence is subtle. The man who can remain calm while others panic, who can stay silent while others scramble to fill the void, who can wait while others rush. He controls the tempo of every interaction. Your indifference isn't apathy. It's strategic detachment. You care deeply about things that matter. Your principles, your goals, your growth, your genuine relationships. But you've learned to be profoundly unmoved by things that don't. Their gossip, their drama, their attempts to draw you into their emotional chaos, their need for you to validate their choices or agree with their opinions. This creates a kind of psychological gravity. People orbit around those who don't need them. They chase what withdraws. They value what remains scarce. Your indifference to their approval makes them work harder to earn it. Your indifference to their presence makes them appreciate it more when they have it. Your indifference to their opinions makes them value yours more highly. You realize now that neediness repels exactly what it seeks. The man desperate for love finds loneliness. The man hungry for respect finds contempt. The man begging for attention finds neglect. But the man who has cultivated genuine self-sufficiency, who has built internal systems of validation and meaning, who operates from abundance rather than scarcity, he becomes magnetic to the very things others chase unsuccessfully. The crown of indifference isn't won through pretending not to care. It's earned through genuinely building a life so rich, so purposeful, so aligned with your values that external validation becomes redundant. When your self-worth comes from your own actions rather than others' reactions, when your happiness comes from your own progress rather than others' approval, when your confidence comes from your own competence rather than others' compliments, then you become truly free. They'll test your indifference, push your buttons, try to provoke reactions, create drama to see if you'll engage, withdraw attention to see if you'll chase. This isn't personal, it's instinct. They're testing whether you're really as independent as you appear, or whether you're just performing indifference while still secretly needing them. Your response? Nothing. No defense, no explanation, no reaction. True indifference doesn't need to prove itself. It simply exists, unmoved by their tests, unaffected by their attempts to regain control. They can only manipulate what you allow them to touch. When you truly need nothing from them, they have nothing to leverage against you. The king doesn't argue with his subjects. He doesn't defend his crown. He doesn't explain his authority. He simply reigns, present, powerful, and completely beyond their ability to disturb his peace. Kings aren't born in palaces. They're forged in winters that would break ordinary men. In seasons when the sky goes dark, when hope freezes in your chest, when every breath cuts like ice through your lungs. While others retreat to comfort, hide behind excuses, or surrender to the cold, you learn something they'll never understand. Winter doesn't destroy, it reveals. It strips away everything weak, everything false, everything unnecessary, leaving only what cannot be broken. You know this truth in your bones, because you've lived it. Those months when everything fell apart simultaneously, when the universe seemed designed to test your breaking point, when sleep became your only escape and waking up felt like punishment. But you didn't break. You bent, you bled, you barely held on. But you didn't break. And in that refusal to shatter, something harder crystallized in your core. Something that soft men will never develop because they'll never be pressed hard enough to need it. The capacity to function while in pain isn't common. Most people require optimal conditions to perform: the right mood, the right environment, the right support, the right circumstances. But you learned to operate in chaos, to think clearly while drowning, to make decisions while your world was ending, to carry responsibility when you could barely carry yourself. This isn't just resilience. It's a rare form of psychological engineering that only exists in men who've been pressure tested by forces that would hospitalize weaker souls. Winter taught you the difference between comfort and strength, between needing perfect conditions and creating strength regardless of conditions, between waiting for storms to pass and learning to dance in the rain. While others learned to avoid difficulty, you learned to function within it. While they developed dependency on external stability, you developed internal gyroscopes that keep you steady regardless of how violently the world tilts. There's a cold clarity that comes from surviving what you thought would kill you. A perspective shift that changes everything. Problems that send other men into panic become puzzles to solve. Pressures that crush other men become familiar weight you've learned to carry. Challenges that paralyze other men become competitions you've already won by surviving worse. You operate from a different baseline now. Not 0, but -10. Everything above that feels manageable because you've already proven you can function below it. You see them crumble at the first sign of resistance. Grown men falling apart when criticized. Leaders abandoning ship when the waters get rough. Strong facades collapsing the moment real pressure is applied. And you remember quietly without judgment all the times you functioned while your internal world was a war zone. When you showed up despite heartbreak. When you performed despite betrayal. When you led despite being broken inside. This capacity isn't theoretical. It's been tested, verified, proven under fire. You know exactly what you're capable of surviving, because you've already survived it. You know exactly how much pressure you can handle, because you've already handled more. You know exactly how dark it can get, and still function, because you've operated in darker conditions and emerged not just alive, but stronger. Winter crowns are different from summer crowns. Summer crowns are inherited, appointed, ceremonial. Winter crowns are earned through endurance, forged through suffering, earned through refusing to quit, when quitting was the logical choice. The authority that comes from winter kingship isn't granted, it's recognized. People sense something different about you, something tested, something that's been through fire and emerged refined rather than consumed. Your darkest seasons weren't your punishment. They were your preparation. For what? For leadership when others panic. For stability when others chaos. For clarity when others confusion. For strength when others weakness. The world needs men who can function when systems fail, who can think when others freeze, who can lead when others follow, who can build when others only know how to consume. You carry winter in your pocket now, not as trauma, but as proof. Proof that you can survive what destroys other men. Proof that you can function under pressure that breaks other men. Proof that you can carry weights that crush other men. This isn't about being invulnerable. It's about being undeterred. Scars don't make you impervious to pain. They make you competent at handling it. The crown waiting for you isn't made of gold. It's made of compressed carbon. Every moment you refuse to break, despite pressure creating another layer of something harder than diamond. Winter tested your capacity. You passed. Summer tested your character. You passed. Now comes the final test. Will you claim the throne that your endurance earned? Or will you continue pretending that surviving hell doesn't qualify you to rule on earth? Kings aren't born. They're pressure-tested, winter-forged, and crowned by their capacity to carry what crushes ordinary men. Winter didn't break you. It crowned you. Time to wear it. Real power transfers in whispers, not shouts. In movements so subtle that by the time they're noticed, the revolution is already complete. The throne was never taken by the man who announced his intentions. It was claimed by the one who simply began ruling, while others were still debating who deserved to lead. You've spent years in reconnaissance, studying the terrain, mapping the weaknesses, understanding the game. Now comes the translation from observer to operator, from student to sovereign, from shadow to throne. You know something they don't. Power isn't seized through violence or claimed through declaration. It's assumed through competence. While they argue about authority, you demonstrate capability. While they campaign for position, you solve problems. While they politic for influence, you create value. The crown doesn't go to the loudest voice, but to the most indispensable presence. The silent coup begins with a simple recognition. You've already done the work. Years of isolation taught you self-reliance. Years of pain taught you resilience. Years of observation taught you strategy. Years of being underestimated taught you patience. Every lesson learned in shadow. Every skill developed in silence. Every strength forged in solitude. All preparation for this moment when preparation meets opportunity. You don't need to announce your ascension because your competence announces itself. When systems fail, you function. When others panic, you plan. When chaos erupts, you create order. Not through force, but through focus. Not through aggression, but through precision. The world recognizes authority when it sees solutions where others see only problems. Progress where others see only obstacles. Leadership where others see only confusion. This isn't about taking anyone's place. It's about creating your own space, your own kingdom, your own rules, your own court. The men worth ruling don't need to be conquered. They recognize superior architecture when they see it, and align themselves accordingly. The rest become irrelevant through their own choices, not through your action against them. The infrastructure was built in shadow. Your emotional independence, your strategic thinking, your ability to see patterns others miss, your immunity to manipulation, your comfort with solitude, your competence under pressure. Every day spent developing these capabilities was a day spent building the foundation of your sovereignty. They thought you were healing, learning, growing. You were architecting an empire. The coup happens when you stop asking for permission and start making decisions. When you stop seeking validation and start creating value. When you stop waiting for opportunity and start engineering outcomes. The shift isn't dramatic, it's decisive. One day you're asking what they think. The next day you're telling them what you've decided. One day you're hoping they'll include you. The next day you're choosing who gets access to you. Power recognizes power, and weakness recognizes power too. They'll sense the change before they understand it. Something in your posture, something in your certainty, something in the way you no longer need their approval or fear their disapproval. The energy shifts, and suddenly they're orienting themselves around you rather than expecting you to orbit around them. But here's the final test. Will you take the throne, or will you remain forever preparing for it? The difference between potential and actualization is action. The difference between being capable of ruling and actually ruling is decision. The difference between having power and wielding power is courage. The courage to stop pretending you're still the man who needed their permission and start being the man who grants it. Your reconnaissance phase is over. Your preparation is complete. Your capacity is proven. The only question remaining isn't whether you're ready. It's whether you'll claim what you've already earned through years of silent development, patient observation, and strategic restraint. The boy hoped for acceptance. The man demanded respect. The king simply exists, and the world reorganizes itself around his presence. Not through force, but through the undeniable reality that some men are built to lead, and others are built to follow. Some are built to create, and others to consume. Some are built to rule, and others to be ruled. Your silence was never weakness. It was preparation. Your isolation was never punishment. It was training. Your pain was never random. It was forging. Everything that happened to you was preparing you for what happens next. The moment when observation becomes action, when preparation becomes execution, when potential becomes power. The throne isn't empty. It's invisible to everyone except those strong enough to see it, wise enough to claim it, and dangerous enough to hold it. Your silence ends now. Your reign begins with the first word you speak as king rather than subject. Choose that word carefully. It will echo in the minds of everyone who hears it, marking the moment when power shifted and the world recognized a new sovereign. The silent coup is complete. Long live the king you've always been.